My name is Leo Miller, and for the last 3 years, my world has been just two people big. Me and my son, Cody. He's 9, with a mop of brown hair, just like his mom's, and a smile that can still make my heart ache. We lost my wife, Sarah, to a sickness that no amount of love or hope could cure. She was only 31. Since that day, I've been both mom and dad. A role I never asked for, but one I wouldn't trade for anything. Life as a single dad isn't easy, especially when you're trying to make ends meet on a park maintenance technician's salary. My job with the Maple Creek Parks and Rec Department doesn't pay much, but it offers something more valuable than money: flexibility. I can be there to pick Cody up from Lincoln Elementary at 3:15 sharp. I can make it to parent-teacher conferences without begging for time off. And I can be the one to tuck him in at night. Our routine was simple, carved out of necessity and love. After my shift of fixing swing sets and mowing lawns, I'd grab Cody from school and we'd head straight to Oak Ridge Community Park. It was our place, a sprawling patch of green where kids from the new, expensive houses on the north side played alongside kids from the modest, hard-working neighborhoods like ours. Cody would burn off his school day energy on the jungle gym while I'd sit on our usual bench, a worn-out paperback in my hand, glancing up every few minutes to make sure he was okay. It was more than just a playground. It was a classroom of a different kind. I loved that Cody was learning that the value of a friend had nothing to do with the brand of their sneakers or the size of their parents' house. He was learning about life, about people. We were a team. Him and I, navigating our small, quiet world together. We didn't have much, but we had each other. And we had our routine. It was our anchor in the choppy waters of life after Sarah. It was our peace. A simple, predictable life that I cherished more than words can say. Little did I know, our entire world was about to be turned upside down by a single, terrifying moment. Before we get into the details of that day, the day that changed everything, I just want to say hello to everyone listening. It means a lot that you're here. I'd love to know where you're all tuning in from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Drop a comment below and let me know. Okay, let's get back to it. It was a perfect Tuesday afternoon in early October, the kind of day where the air is crisp and the sun feels warm on your skin. The park was busier than usual. A few local schools had let out early for some kind of teacher training day. I'd just finished checking the hardware on the swing set and settled onto my bench. Cody was already in the thick of a game of tag with the group of kids near the climbing structure, his laughter carrying on the breeze. I opened my book, a cheap thriller I'd picked up at a garage sale, but my focus wasn't really on the page. It was on my son. On the simple, uncomplicated joy of being a father. That's when I saw her. A little girl, couldn't have been more than 6, sitting all by herself on a bench near the sandbox. Her face was scrunched up in frustration, her tiny fingers fumbling with a shoelace that had come undone. The other kids were running and shouting, but she was stuck, locked in that little world of childhood embarrassment where you feel like everyone is watching you fail at something simple. I scanned the area for her parents, but no one seemed to be paying her any mind. My dad instincts kicked in. It's an automatic switch that flips when you see a kid in need. I closed my book and walked over, kneeling down to her eye level so I wouldn't seem like some big, scary adult. "Hey there," I said softly, using the same gentle tone I used with Cody's friends. "Having a little trouble with that shoe?" She looked up at me, her eyes wide and cautious. I could see she'd been taught the stranger danger lesson well. But her frustration was winning out over her caution. "My daddy usually helps me," she whispered. "But he's not here." "Well, I'm a dad. I'm pretty good at shoes," I said with a smile. I took the laces and, explaining each step as I went, tied them into a sturdy double knot. "There you go," I said, patting her shoe. "That ought to hold." She thanked me with a shy little smile and ran off to join the other kids. I smiled, feeling that small warmth you get from helping someone, that simple human connection. I had no idea that simple act of tying a shoelace had just sealed my fate. I watched her run back towards the climbing structure, a small, bright figure rejoining the happy chaos of the playground. I turned to head back to my bench, feeling good about the world. For a moment, everything was perfect. The sun was shining, the kids were laughing, my son was safe. And then the peace was shattered. It started with shouting, angry, frantic voices that didn't belong in a place of childhood innocence. I stood up straight, my senses on high alert, my eyes scanning the park, trying to pinpoint the source of the trouble. My first thought, my only thought, was Cody. Find Cody. The chaos escalated in a heartbeat. A man came sprinting across the grass from the direction of the parking lot. He wasn't jogging, he was running with a desperate, erratic energy that screamed danger. His eyes were wild, his movements unpredictable, and in his hand, he was holding something that made my blood run cold. A pistol. He was waving it recklessly, shouting nonsense, threats aimed at no one and everyone at all at once. Panic erupted. Parents started screaming, grabbing their children, trying to run. But which way was safe? The man was a whirlwind of menace, a tornado cutting through our peaceful afternoon. My eyes finally found Cody, who was frozen near the slides, his face a mask of confusion and fear. But then my gaze shifted, and a new, more immediate horror seized me. The little girl. The one whose shoe I had just tied. She was standing right in the gunman's path. She had stopped, turning back towards the sound of the shouting, her small face crumpled in confusion. She was too young to understand the danger, too small to react. She was a deer in the headlights, and the truck was bearing down on her at full speed. There was no time to think. There was no weighing of options. My body moved on its own, propelled by a force older than reason itself, the instinct to protect. All I could see was that little girl's terrified face, and I knew I had to get to her. What happened next is a blur of motion and pain. I sprinted. I don't think my feet even touched the ground. The world narrowed to a single point. The small, defenseless child in the path of destruction. The shouts, the screams, they all faded into a dull roar in the background. My only focus was closing the distance between us. I reached her just as the gunman raised his arm. I didn't hesitate. I lunged, tackling her with all my strength, wrapping my arms around her small frame. We hit the ground hard, rolling behind a thick, concrete planter that offered the barest minimum of cover. The gunshot was deafening. It was a physical blow, a concussive force that rocked the air around us. And with it came the pain. A white-hot, searing agony that tore through my left shoulder. It felt like being hit with a sledgehammer and a branding iron at the same time. I gasped. The wind knocked out of me, but my grip on the little girl never loosened. She was crying, trembling in my arms, but she was alive. She was unharmed. The immediate aftermath was pure chaos. The gunman, apparently as shocked by his own action as everyone else, had turned and fled the scene. People were screaming into their cell phones, dialing 911. A few brave parents were rushing towards me, while others huddled with their own children, trying to comfort them. Pain exploded through my upper body, a dizzying, nauseating wave. I pressed my right hand to my left shoulder, and it came away slick and warm with blood. My own blood. Cody, my son, ran to my side, his face pale, tears streaming down his cheeks. Dad, are you okay?" he cried, his small hands trying to press on the wound, trying to fix something that was so terribly broken. I tried to tell him it was okay, but the words caught in my throat. We were waiting for the sirens, for the flashing lights of an ambulance and police cars. That's what's supposed to happen. But what arrived instead was something else entirely. A sleek black sedan with windows so dark you couldn't see inside. It screeched to a halt at the curb with a smooth, practiced efficiency that felt out of place in the surrounding panic. The doors opened, and two men in immaculate dark suits stepped out. They weren't cops. They weren't paramedics. They surveyed the scene with calm, professional eyes, their gazes sweeping over the crowd before landing directly on me. One of them knelt beside me, his voice calm and authoritative, ignoring my bleeding shoulder. "Mr. Miller?" he asked. "He wants to see you, right now." I had no idea who he was, but it was clear this wasn't a normal emergency response. Confusion warred with the throbbing pain in my shoulder. "What? Who?" I managed to get out, my voice strained. I need a hospital. My son." "Your son will come with us," the second man said, his tone matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. He was already looking at Cody, who was still kneeling beside me, his small face a mixture of terror and bewilderment. The first man leaned in closer. "Medical care will be provided, Mr. Miller, but our employer insisted on meeting you personally first." Before I could protest, before I could fully process the sheer insanity of the situation, they were helping me to my feet. Their movements were efficient, practiced. One man supported my weight, careful of my injured shoulder, while the other gently guided Cody to follow. The crowd of onlookers just stared, their faces a gallery of confusion. They had expected an ambulance, and instead they were witnessing what looked like a scene from a spy movie. They led us to the black car and opened the back door. The interior was all black leather and polished chrome, smelling of money. It was outfitted with communication equipment that looked more advanced than what the police used. I found myself sitting in the plush back seat with Cody pressed tightly against my good side, his small hand clutching my jacket. I tried to reassure him, to tell him everything would be all right, but I wasn't even sure I believed it myself. "Where are you taking us?" I asked, the words coming out as a pained gasp. "My son is scared. I've been shot. I need a doctor, not a chauffeur." The man in the passenger seat turned slightly. His face was impassive, a professional mask. "As I said, sir, medical care will be provided. Our employer has his reasons for wanting to handle this privately. Public attention can be complicated." Complicated? I'd just taken a bullet for a child in a public park. Things were already about as complicated as they could get. As the car pulled smoothly away from the curb, leaving the chaos of Oak Ridge Park behind, I looked out the window. My heart sank. I knew the routes to every hospital in Maple Creek. We weren't heading towards any of them. We were driving towards the rolling hills and gated estates of Hillcrest, the enclave where the city's wealthiest residents lived, walled off from the problems of the rest of the world. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic rhythm of pain and pure, unadulterated confusion. The 15-minute drive felt like an eternity. I spent it trying to keep pressure on my shoulder with one hand while holding Cody's with the other, whispering reassurances I didn't feel. The sleek car ate at miles, gliding through manicured streets lined with trees and imposing brick walls. Finally, the driver turned into a private driveway marked by an enormous wrought iron gate. The gate swung open automatically as we approached, as if we were expected. Of course, we were expected. Beyond the gate lay an estate that looked like something out of a magazine about the lifestyles of the rich and famous. A sprawling mansion of stone and glass sat atop a hill, surrounded by acres of perfectly landscaped gardens. It was the kind of wealth that felt like a different language, one I had never learned to speak. The car came to a silent stop under a grand portico, and the men in suits got out, opening our doors. They guided me and Cody, who was clinging to my hand for dear life, up the stone steps and through a set of massive oak doors. The inside was even more impressive than the outside. The foyer was vast, with marble floors that echoed our footsteps, a crystal chandelier the size of a small car hanging from the two-story ceiling, and original paintings on the walls that I was sure were worth more than my house. But my attention wasn't on the artwork or the architecture. It was on the figure waiting for us in the center of the grand hall. An elderly man sat in an expensive, high-tech wheelchair. He was dressed in a simple but clearly expensive cashmere sweater, and despite his physical confinement, he radiated an aura of immense power and authority. It was the kind of presence that commanded a room without a single word. I recognized him from the business section of the local paper. This was Arthur Vance, the reclusive billionaire, the founder of Vance Technologies, a man whose real estate and tech investments had practically built this city.
He was 73 years old, and a stroke 5 years ago put him in that chair, but it was clear his mind was as sharp as anything. He looked from me to Cody, his gaze intense, but not unkind. "Mr. Miller," he said, "please forgive the rather dramatic circumstances of our meeting. I wanted to speak with you personally before this situation became a media circus." I stammered, my head swimming from the pain and the sheer surreality of it all. "I'm sorry, sir, but I think there's been some kind of mistake. You, I just, I just helped a little girl at the park. I don't understand why I'm here."
He looked at me, his expression softening with an emotion I couldn't quite place, and said the words that would change my life forever. Arthur Vance gestured to a plush armchair near his wheelchair. "Please, Mr. Miller, sit before you fall. You've lost a lot of blood." I sank into the chair, grateful to be off my feet. Cody stayed glued to my side, his wide eyes taking in the opulent surroundings and the imposing man before us. "The little girl you saved, Mr. Miller," Arthur began, and his commanding voice was now thick with an emotion that sounded like raw, unfiltered grief. "That little girl is my granddaughter, Chloe. She is the only family I have left in this entire world." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Chloe, his granddaughter. The little girl with the untied shoelace wasn't just any kid from the neighborhood. She was the sole heir to the Vance fortune, the cherished granddaughter of one of the most powerful men in the state. The weight of what I had done, of what could have happened, suddenly crashed down on me. I hadn't just saved a child, I had saved this man's entire world. As if on cue, a side door opened, and a woman in a crisp nanny's uniform led Chloe into the room. She was no longer in her playground clothes, but was dressed in a little blue dress, her hair neatly brushed. But her eyes were the same, big, brown, and a little shy. She saw me, and her face lit up with a tentative smile. "Chloe's parents," Arthur continued, his voice heavy with a sorrow that all his money couldn't cure. "My son and his wife. They were lost in a car accident 2 years ago. Since then, she's lived here with me. She's had a hard time. Afraid of public places, hesitant to trust new people. Today was one of the first times she'd been willing to go to a regular park." I looked at Chloe, and she took a few hesitant steps towards me. She stopped in front of my chair and looked at my bandaged shoulder. "Does it hurt?" she asked, her voice a small whisper. "A little," I managed to say, my own throat tightening. She reached out a tiny hand and gently touched my good arm. "Thank you for pushing me," she said. "The scary man was loud." Tears pricked my eyes. This sweet little girl had been through so much trauma, and today had just added another layer to it. A discreet cough from the doorway announced another arrival, a distinguished, silver-haired man carrying a black medical bag. "Mr. Vance," the man said professionally, "I understand we have a patient." Arthur nodded towards me. "Dr. Patterson, this is Mr. Leo Miller. He needs your immediate attention." He then looked at me. "The doctor will take excellent care of your wound right here. We have a fully equipped medical facility in the East Wing. It's better to avoid the hospital, the media reports, all the complications." As Dr. Patterson began to gently examine my shoulder, Arthur Vance leaned forward, his weathered hand resting on my knee. "What you did today, Mr. Miller," he said, his voice low and intense, "has created a debt I fully intend to repay." I thought he was just being grateful, but I was about to find out his idea of repayment was beyond anything I could have ever imagined. Dr. Patterson was efficient and professional. He cleaned the wound, told me the bullet had passed clean through the fleshy part of my shoulder, incredibly lucky, he called it, and stitched me up with a practiced hand. The pain was still there, a deep, throbbing ache, but it was manageable now, dulled by a powerful painkiller he'd given me. Afterward, Arthur insisted that Cody and I stay at the mansion. Just for a few days,
he said, waving off my protests, "so Dr. Patterson can monitor your recovery. It's the least I can do." It was framed as a medical necessity, but I could see something else in the old man's eyes. Loneliness. This huge, silent mansion felt more like a museum than a home, and I got the sense he genuinely wanted the life and energy that a 9-year-old boy brought with him. So we stayed. We were shown to a guest suite that was larger than my entire house, with 2 bedrooms, a marble bathroom, and a balcony overlooking the vast gardens. Cody, with the amazing resilience of a child, adapted almost instantly. He was fascinated by the library filled with leather-bound books, thrilled by the indoor swimming pool, and most of all, he was happy to have a new friend. He and Chloe became inseparable. It was a beautiful thing to watch. Chloe, who Arthur had described as withdrawn and cautious, seemed to bloom in Cody's presence. I'd hear them laughing as they explored the gardens, or find them sitting together in the library, Cody reading a comic book aloud to her. It was clear they were healing something in each other. On our second day there, however, a new element was introduced into our strange gilded cage. I was sitting by the pool, watching the kids play, when a sleek luxury car pulled up the driveway. A woman, probably in her early 40s, emerged. She was impeccably dressed in designer clothes, her hair perfectly styled, her face a mask of cool indifference. She walked into the mansion like she owned the place. Later that afternoon, Arthur introduced us. "Leo, Cody, I'd like you to meet my niece, Cynthia Vance." Cynthia looked us up and down, a slow, appraising glance that made me feel like a piece of dirt she'd found on her expensive rug. Her eyes, cold and sharp, lingered on my worn-out jeans and Cody's simple t-shirt. "So," she said, her voice smooth but laced with something unpleasant, "you're the hero of the hour." She offered a smile, but it was a thin, brittle thing that didn't come close to reaching her eyes. I felt a chill run down my spine, a prickle of warning. I knew, right then and there, that this woman saw us not as guests or as the saviors of her cousin, but as a threat. I knew she was going to be trouble. The next morning, after a breakfast served by a silent butler in a dining room that could have seated 30, Arthur Vance requested my presence in his study. The room was magnificent, lined from floor to ceiling with dark mahogany bookshelves filled with rare books. A fireplace crackled in a large stone fireplace, even though it wasn't particularly cold outside. It was a room that smelled of old leather, wood smoke, and money. Arthur was sitting behind a massive desk, a chessboard set up beside him. He gestured for me to take the seat opposite him. "Leo," he began, his tone direct, "having you and the boy here these last few days, it's reminded me of what this house used to be like, filled with life, with laughter." He paused, his gaze drifting towards the window. "It has been a long time since I heard a child's laughter echo in these halls." He turned his focus back to me, his eyes sharp and analytical. "I've had my people look into you, Leo. I hope you don't mind. I am a man who believes in knowing all the angles." I felt a flash of unease, but he continued before I could respond. "You're a good man, a hard-working father. You've handled tragedy with grace and dignity. You live a modest life, and you've raised an exceptional son."
He folded his hands on the desk. "That is why I want to make you an offer. An unconventional one, I admit, but our entire acquaintance has been unconventional from the start." My heart began to beat a little faster. I had no idea what was coming. "I want to offer you a position," he said, "as the estate manager and head groundskeeper for the entire Vance compound. The responsibilities would include overseeing the gardens, maintaining the recreational facilities, and generally serving as the caretaker for this property." I was stunned into silence. I was a park maintenance guy. I fixed sprinklers and emptied trash cans. This was a different universe. "The position," he continued, as if sensing my shock, "would come with a salary that is, let's say, substantially more than your current municipal employment. It would include comprehensive health insurance for you and your son, a retirement plan, and, of course, living quarters here on the estate. There is a three-bedroom caretaker's cottage on the west side of the property. It's private, comfortable, and would provide Cody with a safe environment and access to resources, tutors, anything he needs to help him build a stable future. The offer was a lifeline, a winning lottery ticket I never even bought. It was a way out of the constant financial worry, a path to a future for Cody I could never have provided. But as I looked at the sheer luxury around me, a voice of doubt crept in. Was this the right thing for my son? Before I could answer, the door creaked open. It was Cody, standing hesitantly in the doorway, his expression serious. "Dad, can I talk to you?" "Of course, buddy. Come on in," I said, relieved for the interruption. Arthur smiled warmly at him. Cody walked over to my chair, his eyes fixed on the floor before he finally looked up at me. "Dad," he said, his voice quiet but full of a thoughtful consideration that seemed far beyond his 9 years. "Chloe, she asked me if we were going to live here forever, and I didn't know what to tell her." He took a deep breath. "But I think it might be good if we stayed, for a while at least." I looked at him, surprised. "Why do you say that, son?" "Because," he said, glancing over at Arthur, then back at me, "because she doesn't have a mom or a dad, and we don't have a mom anymore." My heart twisted at his words. "So maybe we could be like a family, together. She needs us, Dad, and maybe we need her too." The simple, profound wisdom of my 9-year-old son cut through all my adult anxieties about pride, charity, and independence. He wasn't thinking about the money or the mansion. He was thinking about connection, about loneliness, about family. He had identified the one thing that truly mattered in this whole strange equation. Tears welled in my eyes. I looked at Arthur, who was watching the exchange with a deeply moved expression. He had seen it too. This wasn't about him repaying a debt to me. It was about 4 lonely people finding a way to fill the empty spaces in each other's lives. My decision was made. I turned to Arthur, ready to accept when a new voice cut through the moment. "How touching." Cynthia Vance was standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame with a smirk on her face. She must have been listening the whole time. A regular little family being formed right before our very eyes. She walked into the room, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She stopped by Arthur's desk and placed a manicured hand on his shoulder. Uncle Arthur has always had such a soft spot for the less fortunate. It's one of his most endearing qualities. Her words were dipped in poison, each one a carefully aimed barb designed to remind me of my place. She was calling me a charity case, a gold digger manipulating her kind-hearted old uncle. The warmth of the moment vanished, replaced by a cold fury. I looked at her, then back at Arthur. I accepted his offer, but with a new condition. On a 3-month trial basis, I said, my voice firm, to make sure it's a good fit for everyone. What I really meant was I was determined to prove her wrong, but I had severely underestimated just how far she would go to get us out of his uncle's house and out of his will. We moved into the caretaker's cottage the next day. It was beautiful, a cozy stone house with a fireplace, a modern kitchen, and a small yard of its own. It was a home, a real home, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt a sense of security, a feeling that we might actually be okay. I threw myself into the work. It was a bigger scale than the city parks, but the principles were the same: dedication, attention to detail, and a little bit of elbow grease. The sprawling gardens began to look sharper, the lawns more pristine. I enjoyed the work, the feeling of building and nurturing something with my own hands. Cody and Chloe were in heaven. They spent their days exploring the woods on the property, building forts, and, with Arthur's delighted permission, planning a vegetable garden right next to our cottage. Life was good. It was almost perfect. And that, I should have known, was when the other shoe was going to drop.
It happened about a week after we moved in. I was in the main house discussing a landscaping plan with Arthur in his study when we heard Cynthia's raised voice from the living room. It was a shrill, theatrical sound designed to attract attention. We walked out to see what the commotion was about. Cynthia was standing in front of a large glass display cabinet, her hand pressed to her chest in a gesture of fake distress. A few of the household staff were standing nearby, looking nervous. She finally spoke. Seamless. What? It's gone! She declared dramatically. It's simply vanished. What's gone, Cynthia? Arthur asked, his voice laced with impatience. Mother's diamond brooch, she exclaimed, pointing a long, red-nailed finger at an empty velvet spot in the cabinet. The one you kept in her memory. It was right here yesterday. I saw it myself. Then she turned, her cold eyes sweeping over the staff before landing, with deliberate precision, on me. It's funny, she said, her voice dripping with insinuation. We've never had a problem with security in this house. Not until recently. Not until we started letting strangers have the run of the place. The accusation hung in the air, thick and ugly. The staff shifted uncomfortably. My face flushed with a mixture of anger and humiliation. She was accusing me of being a thief. That's a serious accusation, Cynthia, Arthur said, his brow furrowed. Is it? A man of his background suddenly living in the lap of luxury? It's a classic story, Uncle. He sees an opportunity. I think you should have his cottage searched and his person. My blood ran cold. She was trying to frame me, to destroy me in front of the very man who had offered me a new life. Arthur looked torn, the seed of doubt she had planted clearly taking root. To my horror, he looked at his head of security and gave a slight nod. Do it, he said quietly, to clear the air. My heart sank as the security guards walked towards me. My new life? My son's future? It was all about to be destroyed by a lie before it had even truly begun.
What would you have done in my shoes? Faced with a false accusation from someone with that much power, how would you have reacted? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious. I stood there frozen as the two security guards approached. Humiliation washed over me in a hot wave. They were going to search me, search my home, in front of my son's new friend, in front of the man who had shown me such kindness. Cynthia watched with a triumphant smirk, her arms crossed, savoring her victory. I felt utterly powerless, a fly caught in a very rich and intricate spider's web. My word meant nothing against hers. I was the poor park worker, the charity case. Of course I'd be the thief. This is unnecessary, I said, my voice shaking with barely controlled rage. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear, Cynthia cooed, her voice oozing false sweetness. The guards were about to lead me away when a small voice piped up. Grandpa? Everyone turned. Chloe and Cody were standing in the archway leading from the garden, their faces smudged with dirt from their new vegetable patch project. They had clearly heard the commotion and come to investigate. Chloe walked forward, her small hand clutching Cody's. She looked from my face to her aunt's, then up at her grandfather. Grandpa, she said again, her voice clear as a bell in the suddenly silent room. Aunt Cynthia is wrong. The pretty pin isn't gone. Cynthia's smirk faltered. What are you talking about, you silly girl? Of course it's gone. Go back outside and play. But Chloe stood her ground, her small chin set with determination. She looked directly at Arthur. She showed it to me yesterday. She took it out of the box. Arthur's eyes narrowed. She did what? She said it was her special secret. She said it was too pretty to leave in a boring box. She said she was going to keep it safe. And then she put it in her purse. The silence in the room was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. Every eye swung from the little girl to Cynthia, whose face had gone from triumphant to a pasty, sickly white. She looked like she had been slapped. That's ridiculous. She's a child. She's making things up, Cynthia stammered, her composure finally cracking. Arthur didn't even look at her. His gaze was fixed on Chloe. Is that true, sweetheart? You saw her put it in her purse?
She nodded vigorously. Yes, Grandpa, her big red one. Arthur's gaze slowly moved to the red designer handbag slung over Cynthia's shoulder. His face was like a stone mask, but his eyes were blazing with a cold, contained fury I had never seen before. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The quiet menace in his tone was more terrifying than any shout. "Cynthia," he said, his voice deadly calm, "show me what is in your handbag." She was speechless, cornered by the testimony of a 6-year-old. She clutched her purse to her chest as if it were a life raft. Arthur simply gestured to his head of security. The large man stepped forward, and with a look of utter resignation, Cynthia unclasped the bag and turned it upside down on a nearby table. Amidst the lipstick, keys, and wallet, the diamond brooch clattered onto the polished wood, its facets catching the light, shining like a beacon of truth. The game was over. She was caught. As she was escorted from the mansion, she shot me a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. I knew then, with chilling certainty, that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. After Cynthia was gone, an uncomfortable silence settled over the room. The household staff quietly dispersed, leaving just me, Cody, Chloe, and Arthur. The old man looked exhausted, as if the confrontation had drained him of all his energy. He wheeled himself over to me, his face etched with regret. "Leo," he said, his voice heavy, "I am deeply, profoundly sorry. I should never have doubted you. I let her poison get into my head, and for that, I am ashamed." "It's okay, Arthur," I said, and I meant it. In his position, with his own family making such an accusation, I could understand his brief moment of uncertainty. "No, it is not okay," he insisted, shaking his head. "It was a test, and I'm afraid I failed it. But you, Leo, you did not. Your character and the character of your son has shown through." He looked over at Cody and Chloe, who were now sitting together on the sofa, Chloe quietly explaining the rules of a card game. "This incident," he said, "as ugly as it was, has shown me the truth. It has shown me who truly belongs in this family." The A word hung in the air. Family. He wasn't just talking about blood relatives anymore. The next day, Arthur called me to his study again. This time, there was no tension, only a renewed sense of purpose in his eyes. He wanted to do something to make things right, to wash away the stain of Cynthia's betrayal. He told me about an old fishing pond on the far side of the estate. It had been his son's favorite spot, but since his death, it had fallen into disrepair, overgrown with weeds and cattles. He wanted, "I want you to restore it, Leo. I want you to bring it back to life. Not just as a job, but as a project. For you, for Cody, and for Chloe. I want you to teach them how to fish, how to care for the land. I want you to build something together." It was the perfect olive branch. It was more than just a project. It was a symbol. It was a chance for us to create something new and beautiful out of a place that held old, sad memories. It was a chance to build our own memories there. I agreed immediately. The prospect of having a project to share with the kids, of teaching my son and this sweet little girl one of my own favorite pastimes, filled me with a warmth that had nothing to do with financial security. It was about purpose. It was about building a future, together. If you're still here with me on this journey, still following along with this crazy story, thank you. It means the world to me. Just do me a quick favor and comment the number 1 down below so I know you're still listening. All right, let's get to the good part. The next 3 months passed in a blur of hard work and quiet happiness. The cloud of Cynthia's presence was gone, and in its absence, the mansion began to feel less like a gilded cage and more like a home. The trial period came and went without a single mention. It was clear to everyone that this was a permanent arrangement. My shoulder healed completely, leaving behind a puckered scar that served as a constant reminder of the day our lives changed forever. I poured my energy into the estate, and with the resources Arthur provided, I was able to do things I'd only ever dreamed of in my old job. We didn't just maintain the gardens, we transformed them. We built raised garden beds where Cody and Chloe could plant their vegetables, watching with pride as their first tomatoes began to ripen on the vine. We cleared new nature trails, making them wide and smooth enough for Arthur's wheelchair so he could join us on our walks.
But our main project, our pride and joy, was the fishing pond. We worked on it every weekend. We cleared the overgrown brush, repaired the old wooden dock, and even built a small stone fire pit nearby. Arthur had the pond restocked with bass and bluegill, and I spent hours teaching Cody and Chloe how to cast a line, how to bait a hook, and, most importantly, how to be patient. The first time Chloe caught a fish, a tiny little sunfish that shimmered in the afternoon light, her shriek of delight echoed across the water. She was so proud, and Arthur, watching from the dock, had tears in his eyes. In that moment, she wasn't the withdrawn, fearful child I had first met. She was just a kid, happy and confident and loud. She and Cody had become the siblings neither of them ever had. They had their own secret jokes, their own made-up games. They argued like brother and sister and defended each other fiercely. Cody had gained not only a best friend, but access to tutors and opportunities that were expanding his world in ways I could never have afforded. And Chloe, in turn, had gained something no amount of money could buy. The simple, everyday companionship of another child, the protective presence of a big brother. We had become a family. A strange, unconventional, patched-together family, but a family nonetheless. I was still Cody's dad, first and foremost, but I had also become a trusted friend to Arthur and a protective, uncle-like figure to Chloe. We ate dinner together most nights, sharing stories about our day. We watched movies in the mansion's home theater, the four of us piled on the huge sofas. We had built a life here, a real one, based on more than just gratitude or employment. We had built it on care, on laughter, and on shared moments by that newly restored fishing pond. One late afternoon, as the sun began to dip below the trees, casting a golden glow across the water, I was sitting on the edge of the newly finished dock. Cody and Chloe were a few feet away, launching little paper boats they had made, their laughter the only sound in the peaceful quiet. It was one of those perfect moments, the kind you wish you could bottle up and save forever. The safety, the joy, the carefree innocence, it was everything I had ever wanted for my son. Arthur maneuvered his wheelchair onto the dock and stopped beside me. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, just watching the kids play. "You know, Leo," he said, thoughtfully, his eyes on Chloe, "when I first brought you here, I thought I was repaying a debt, a simple transaction. Your heroic act in exchange for my financial support." He shook his head slowly. "I was a fool. I've come to understand that what you did that day, it went so much deeper than just saving her from physical harm." I turned to listen, recognizing he was sharing something from the heart. Chloe was afraid of everything. Afraid to trust new people, afraid to play freely, afraid the world was just a place where bad things happened to people she loved. You didn't just push her out of the way of a bullet, Leo. You showed her that there are still good people in the world, people who will protect others for no other reason than because it's the right thing to do. You and Cody, you gave her back a piece of the world she had lost. You gave her back her trust. As we watched Cody help Chloe retrieve her paper boat from where it had gotten stuck in the cattails, I reflected on how much my own life had changed. The financial security was a blessing. There was no denying that. But it was this sense of purpose, of belonging, of community, that was the real treasure. I used to worry. I admitted to him, my voice low. I worried that all of this, the mansion, the money, might spoil Cody, that he'd start to take good fortune for granted. "And has you?" asked Arthur. "No," I said with a smile. "He hasn't. I've learned that security and comfort don't automatically create entitled kids.
It's the values you teach them, the example you set. He sees you, he sees me, he sees how we treat each other. That's what's shaping him. Arthur nodded, a look of deep contentment on his face. And Chloe is learning kindness and loyalty from watching you and Cody. Those lessons, they are worth more than any inheritance I could ever leave her. So that's my story. It's a story that started with the loudest, most terrifying sound I've ever heard, but it ended with the quiet, gentle sound of children's laughter echoing across a pond. It's a story about how one single moment, one split-second decision made on pure instinct can change not just one life, but many, weaving them together in ways you could never, ever predict. I learned that courage isn't just about facing down danger. Sometimes it's about opening a door to a new life, even when you're scared of what's on the other side. It's about being brave enough to accept kindness, and even braver to give it. And I learned that family isn't always about the blood you share. It's about the people who show up, the people who stand by you when things get tough, who believe in you when you've been falsely accused, who see the good in you and help you see it in yourself. It's about the people you protect and the people who, in turn, protect you right back. My strange, patched-together group, a single dad, a lonely billionaire, and 2 kids who lost so much, we found each other in the aftermath of a tragedy, and we built a family. My journey taught me that sometimes you find your real home in the most unexpected of places, and your truest family in the people you least expected. It's a lesson I'll carry with me for the rest of my days. Thank you so much for listening, for coming along with me on this incredible ride. It means more than you know. Have you ever had a moment that changed your entire life? Or a person who came into your life and felt like family when you least expected it? I would genuinely love to read about it, so please share your story in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. You never know when one act of kindness might just change the world. Thank you for listening.